This beast of a plant is known as Rhipsalis baccifera, otherwise known as Mistletoe Cactus. And I do believe that this might actually be one of the only cacti that is also native to Africa. It is extensively throughout Central and South America as well, but I do think that the jungle cactus somehow got over to Africa, maybe through migratory birds. It does produce berries, hence baccifera. I believe that does mean berry in Latin. And this beast of a plant is a beast because it was largely growing outside. I actually bought it pretty sizable, so this is kind of cheating because it didn't look this way, and I haven't grown it from like just a little stem of this plant, which, by the way, is actually how you propagate these. So if you look at up closely at one of these stems, you'll see all these little roots right here. And it's totally customary for these jungle cactus to just like split off at the base or where they're jointed and then just fall and then just take root. And that is so typical of these epiphytic plants, especially Rhipsalis, where it just kind of breaks off at the joint, it falls onto another tree, another place, and it starts to grow. These are epiphytic, so they want a little bit of a barkier, kind of well-draining mix, and they prefer to be in a little bit more dappled shade or partial shade conditions because they're typically growing under the forest canopies, so they are being shaded out by some of that harsh, intense UV light. So I have this kind of growing a little bit more into the interior of my space. I would say around 6 to maybe 7 feet away from a southwest facing window. Although I was a little bit concerned, since this was growing outside, whether I should move it a little bit closer to the window, but it seems to have hung on quite nicely. There are a little bit of dried stems in here, and it's really typical for your Rhipsalis to get like a brown stem, but still have green along the edges. And what I typically would do would just be cut off that brown part and then have that little green stem kind of sit into and on the soil surface so that it could actually have an easier time rooting. Now this one has just finished flowering. I'll show you a little bit more of what the flower looks like. It's just a small, relatively insignificant flower. I don't know if these smell. I think the Rhipsalis pilocarpa actually smells just like a really light, faint scent, but I don't smell anything there. And they do get those berries, and I think, again, that's probably how the berry got across to Africa, is probably a migratory bird, pooped it out, and you know, with the bird's poop, it's just like natural fertilizer right there, and then caught seed in Africa. As far as watering this goes, I water this pretty irregularly because it's a little bit further away from a southwest facing light. I find myself watering this a little bit more, like once every 2 weeks, and it seems to be perfectly fine with that. It can go through a little bit of a drought, but then when you water it, you want to be able to water it really thoroughly and make sure that you have a little bit more of a well-draining mixture so that it's just not sitting in water, because as you could see, this is a little bit more of a succulent stem. As long as I've had this, which is for less than a year, however, I have had Rhipsalis baccifera, and it's in my house in various different places, although not this large, and have been growing a little bit longer, and I have not had any problems, no pest pressures whatsoever with these plants. So I have to say, really an excellent choice, particularly for those of us who don't have a tremendous amount of light and want to have a very easygoing plant for the home.